tell me about LSU just decides to throw $1 million, an extra mil, Brian Kelly's way.
So this comes from the Greater Baton Rouge Business Report. There was some missed paperwork discovered by the Louisiana Legislative Auditor's Office. The school accidentally gave Brian Kelly over $1 million across May and June of last year because of a clerical error. Already has a 10-year, $95 million contract, and they gave him an extra $1 million over a month. Apparently, he was paid twice across the months of May and June before the discrepancy was noticed. And apparently they reached some sort of agreement after that. But yes, Brian Kelly was overpaid by a little bit. And I just can't get over how hilarious this story is. We talked about Florida earlier in the week. There are some really incompetent administrations in the SEC, Dave. And I'm like, are these the top two? Are these the two most incompetent run administrations in the SEC at this point?
LSU, the decision to hire Ed Orgeron, and I know they won a championship out of it, was very questionable. But it sounds weird to say that when they won a national title. They've done a lot of things that are questionable. The fact that they were just basically non-existent for the 80s and a good bit of the 90s with all that talent is befuddling. How you could just fall off the map for 2 decades blows my mind. I'll never get that, the same way I'll never get that Florida wasn't relevant in the 80s. I just don't understand how you can't be with all that talent around you. So, I'll defend LSU a little bit. They've got a great baseball program. Will Wade was a terrible hire, but I've been told by people in the know in college basketball that LSU doesn't support its men's basketball program, and so that you basically have to cheat to have success there. So maybe that goes to your point. You basically are standing on third in terms of football and said you just hit a triple. Because there is so much talent there, whether or not you got walked around the bases or not. So, it's hard for me to figure out why LSU isn't one of the most dominant programs in the history of football. So I guess that speaks to your point. They should be right up there with the Notre Dames, the Alabamas, the Southern Californias, if you want to go back a little bit further, the Miamis, if you want to stay more recent in the 2000s and 80s and 90s. The fact that they're not considered one of the elite football programs and kind of in that second tier is really, really bizarre to me.
Yeah, and we see how incompetently run they are just for evidence of it. One of their former athletic directors was the president of the NCAA, or commissioner of the NCAA, whatever you want to say, Mark Emmert. And Mark Emmert is the reason the NCAA was caught flat-footed with NIL money, because they refused to get out ahead of it because they were trying to hold on to something that they knew was not going to hold up in court. And, that's where the NCAA is now. Just for the record, just so people know, we talk about like things like it, in basketball, there's the NCAA tournament, that's a tournament sanctioned by the NCAA. The college football playoff is technically not sanctioned by the NCAA. That's its own agreement among the conferences.
I'm not even really sure there is an NCAA anymore.
Yeah, I'm really sure too.
I got in this conversation with somebody on Twitter. I'm just really not sure that you have an NCAA other than the NCAA basketball tournament. What do they do? Who is going to be in charge of enforcement? I don't know who that is. It leads me to this question, and you have Josh Heupel and Brian Kelly that are both in very good positions at their individual schools for different reasons. I think that both have great tradition, both have great facilities, but it appears as if Josh Heupel has a bit of an offensive mind. Brian Kelly, maybe you could say, is you would say he's most all-time wins at Notre Dame. He's a more accomplished coach, maybe has a bit of an overall feel to a program, if you wanted to argue that, more than Josh Heupel, who's a little bit younger. I'm drawing some conclusions to compare the two, but you have in-state talent at LSU, and then at Tennessee you have good talent around the area, if you include Atlanta and Nashville and so on, but not the same. But you have NIL, which they appeared to have mastered. So are we looking at, and I know Brian Kelly's considerably older, but are we looking at the two next great coaches? Because Nick Saban is going to retire within 3 or 4 years, surely to goodness. You have Kirby Smart, who already is a great coach. Mark Stoops is considered a great coach because he wins at Kentucky, but that's a sliding scale. Are we, as far as the next great coach in the SEC, is it as easy as looking at Josh Heupel and Brian Kelly and choosing between the two?
Kirby Smart notwithstanding, yeah.
I've already got him established.
Okay, yeah, but you're right. Josh Heupel and Brian Kelly. I mean, the question is really who's going to win a national championship first between those two. Tennessee, they're both smart coaches. Tennessee, as an administration, has brains. LSU's administration has no brains. But Brian Kelly has brains. And what we've seen at LSU is, again, you need a combination of one brain cell between like everybody involved in running the football program to win a national title there. You need a little bit more intelligence at Tennessee, and Tennessee has more intelligence. So I think Josh Heupel and Brian Kelly are probably on equal footing in terms of offensive minds. Brian Kelly runs it's technically considered a spread, but there's pro elements to it, and he adapts. He's very good at adapting to his schemes, which you can adapt to your system. You can adapt to your personnel when you can get great personnel, and he can get great personnel at LSU. So I think, look, I've been on this for a while. I loved what LSU did when they threw him all that money. I thought it was a brilliant move. I don't care what anybody says. Notre Dame fans got mad at me. LSU's a better job than Notre Dame by 1,000%. If you ask any, it is so much easier to win at LSU than Notre Dame. And I think Brian Kelly made the right move going to LSU. And I think he's going to win big there. I think with Josh Heupel, I think it's more he's got a creative offensive mind, so he's going to win big because of that. But he's also going to win big because he's got very good administrative support that I think is going to make Tennessee competitive with programs like LSU and Georgia that are in more fertile recruiting grounds where, as I said with LSU, you could put me as athletic director of that program tomorrow with no AD experience, and I can make that a national championship program in a heartbeat.
Travis says, which coach do you value more? One that can rebuild and compete, which would be Brian Kelly, or the coach that has to have talent, which would be Lincoln Riley?
I disagree with that take on Lincoln Riley, but
yeah, I mean, I think he's a good X's and O's coach anyway. So I think they're both very good coaches. If I had to choose between the two and I had a 5-year span, now it's different because of age if I'm talking 10, 15 years, but I would take Brian Kelly over Lincoln Riley.
I probably would too.
I don't think it's a lock either way.
Yeah. I'm not the highest on Brian Kelly's character. I'm going to be honest. I will say that. Like, I think, he seems a little fake to me sometimes. I've seen him throw assistants under the bus, but I mean, as a football mind, look, he's not Hugh Freeze-low character. He's not that. And as a football mind, I think that Brian Kelly is going to dominate the West. Again, LSU should have been dominating the West, like you said, for 45, 50 years. And it's just incessant incompetence that they haven't been able to do that. And so I don't know. I think with Brian Kelly, they can do that, quite honestly.
Portions of the program brought to you by Vassy Lawn and Garden, Man Alive, It's Worth the Drive, industrial, commercial, and residential mowers, especially if you're restocking your fleet at a business, or, hey, let's say that you're starting your own landscaping company. They've got those industrial and commercial mowers that they just don't have anywhere else, and thanks to their buying power, they're able to save you money. So give them a shot at Vassy Lawn and Garden, Man Alive, It's Worth the Drive, Vassy.com. Sam saying, I see Auburn and LSU's resurgent driving Nick's retirement. I don't, Sam. I think it's going to hamper his ability to win at the level he's been at, but I don't see anything chasing Nick Saban away. And even though there were rumors last summer that he was going to retire after the 2022 season, I'm of the mindset that this guy's going to coach until he just can't walk anymore.
Yeah, I don't think Nick Saban knows what else he'd want to do, quite honestly. And so, yeah, I think that Nick Saban is going to I don't think he's going to fall off from relevance. And by the way, yeah, I see Auburn getting good again, but I don't see them surpassing Alabama with Nick Saban, only because I think that Saban can still get good offensive coaches. Just got a good offensive coordinator in Greg Roman from Baltimore recently, and he can still load up on talent. And Hugh Freeze may have the creative mind, but Gus Malzahn had a creative mind, and beat Saban a few times, but never got over the hump with Nick Saban. So I just, and I'm with Smoky Mountain Red on that. The Auburn Freeze marriage working. I think it'll work for a little while, but I think Hugh Freeze is going to do something again to get him in trouble. I just think he's a brazen, classless, horrible human being, and that's going to catch up with him.